Good evening, everybody. Dr. Varun is unfortunately not here. I'm Dr. Saumya. I'm presenting on his behalf. This is our experience on single center experience on pediatric Budd-Chiari syndrome. So, Budd-Chiari syndrome, as we all know, is a hepatic venous outflow obstruction causing due to thrombosis of hepatic veins with or without obstruction of IVC. The etiology can be primary or secondary. The patients present with abdominal pain, hepatomegaly, and ascites leads to portal hypertension and hepatic failure. Hepatic decongestion is the goal of treatment in this. So our study was to analyze the patient characteristics, level of obstruction, mode and outcome of recanalization of hepatic vein, and to study the short and long-term follow-up of these patients. All diagnosed patients of pediatric Budd-Chiari syndrome were included in the study. The duration was 6 years. We have totally 15 number of patients. The age range was from 9 months to 16 years. Median age was 28 months. Male-female ratio was equal. It's a retrospective analysis. The diagnosis of Budd-Chiari was made on ultrasound abdomen with portal and hepatic venous Doppler. Contrast enhanced CT was done in all the patients for pre-procedural planning. MRI was done only in 2 patients. This is the clinical presentation of all our 15 patients. All the patients, almost 14 out of 15 patients had abdominal pain. The rest 80% of patients presented with ascites. 25% of our patients had prior history of loose stools, and some patients had pedal edema and hematemesis. Our last patient was an 18 months old female child with a history of COVID-19 infection in the family 1 month prior to presentation. However, her COVID tests were negative in our institute. Ultrasound Doppler usually has a nice pickup rate, at least by 75% in diagnosing the hepatic venous thrombosis. And we have done CT in all. Lack of visualization of and tortuosity of hepatic veins, along with the presence of collaterals, is suggestive of a Budd-Chiari syndrome. This is the angiogram, pictorial angiogram of the IVC, which shows external compression of IVC probably due to caudate lobe hypertrophy, and there was no hepatic vein reflux coming into the IVC. Just the nubbins where the hepatic vein would join the IVC is seen. So we took a transhepatic access under ultrasound guidance with the help of a Shiba needle. The middle hepatic vein, as you can see, is being punctured. The wire was passed and it was packed deep into the innominate vein, and the middle hepatic vein was initially balloon dilated. Because the length of stenosis was long segment, we ended up stenting this hepatic vein, and the transhepatic access was closed with gel foam. So sites of obstruction in our study, right and middle hepatic vein were in 25%, left and middle hepatic vein in 20%, right and middle hepatic vein in IVC in 20%, left and middle hepatic vein in IVC in 13%. The axis of recanalization, we have done 20% of patients with femoral vein alone, femoral vein and interjugular vein in 33% of patients, and transhepatic alone in 33%. There were 2 patients in whom we initially took a femoral venous axis, but we were not able to enter the hepatic vein, so we had switched over to the transhepatic axis. It was the primary axis of choice in patients who had long segment hepatic venous obstruction. All the children who were planned for transhepatic axis underwent a paracentesis on the day of the procedure slightly before to facilitate the axis. It was taken using a Shiba needle, and the axis site was either closed with embolization coils or gel foam. There were 2 children whose transcatheter procedure was unsuccessful, and they were referred for surgical portocaval shunt. In almost 75% of the patients, we ended up stenting the hepatic veins along with balloon dilatation. Only balloon dilatation we were able to do only in some 20% of patients. The types of stents used were again the peripheral stents like Omnilink, Herculink, and Visipro and Valio. Balloon mounted bare metal stents were used in patients with long segment stenosis because we thought that if this stenosis would recur, we had to redilate them. Pharmacological interventions, along with the stenting of the hepatic vein, all the children were kept on vitamin K antagonists when monitored with PTINR levels to maintain at 2 to 2.5. IV enoxaparin was given for 48 hours to all the patients after stenting. This anticoagulation was continued for 1 year post-procedure. Short-term follow-up, immediate procedural mortality, we didn't have any. However, there was 1 patient who had to undergo reintervention in the form of balloon dilatation immediately, almost like 24 hours after the procedure because of restenosis. We went and balloon dilated it. However, the child succumbed after 1 week. 83% of patients who had significant ascites prior to the procedure had resolution of it after the flow was rehabilitated. Median duration of hospital stay was 6 days. We had a follow-up of 66% of patients, which is 8 out of 12 patients at long-term follow-up data at 1 year. There was no recurrence of mortality, and we didn't have to re-intervene in any of those children. All the children had normal liver function tests with stable INR levels. This is the ultrasound of a child who underwent hepatic venous stenting 3 years ago. You can see the stent is nicely in position with unobstructed stent flows. Limitations of our study, we have a very small number, and most of the patients would be referred to interventional radiology rather than pediatric cardiology first. And ours is only a single center experience, and we have not evaluated the etiology of hepatic venous obstruction. We just treated them and attrition of cohort during follow-up. So Budd-Chiari syndrome requires a high index of suspicion for diagnosis. Multimodality imaging is essential for pre-procedural planning. Transhepatic access is safe and is an alternative in most of the patients. Anticoagulation and hepatic vein rehabilitation go hand in hand, as most patients will have hepatic coagulopathies. Thank you.